Sarah Chen stood in the massive courtyard of the Galactic Defense Academy, her neck craned back to take in the towering crystal spires that stretched impossibly high into the purple sky of Nexus Prime. The architecture seemed to defy physics, with floating platforms connected by streams of light that served as bridges between the various academy buildings. Around her, beings from across the galaxy moved with purpose and confidence, their various forms creating a living museum of evolutionary diversity. The Zephyrians glided past on gossamer wings that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, their delicate features marking them as one of the most aesthetically evolved species in known space. The massive Krolix stomped by on four thick legs, their rocky hide gleaming with metallic deposits that marked their mineral-based physiology. Sleek Veltar moved with liquid grace, their blue-scaled skin reflecting the Academy's ambient lighting like living sapphires. And then there was Sarah, 5'6" of entirely ordinary human, wearing the standard-issue grey cadet uniform that somehow managed to look rumpled despite being freshly replicated that morning. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes held a mixture of wonder and determination that marked her as either very brave or very foolish. The orientation assembly was being held in the Grand Amphitheater, a massive bowl-shaped structure that could accommodate beings of wildly different sizes and atmospheric requirements. Sarah found herself assigned to Section 47C, surrounded by cadets whose very existence challenged her understanding of what life could become. To her left sat Vex High, a crystalline being from the Endorian cluster, whose body was composed of living geometric patterns that shifted and changed with her emotional state. Currently, those patterns were a cool blue-green that Sarah had learned indicated polite interest. To her right was Thorak, a Krolix whose massive frame made the reinforced seating creak ominously with every breath. "First time off-world?" Vex High asked, her voice carrying the musical quality that came from air passing through crystal formations rather than vocal cords. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She had spent the 3-month journey from Earth studying galactic languages and customs, but actually being here, surrounded by beings who could naturally manipulate energy, reshape matter with their thoughts, or survive in the vacuum of space, made her feel like a particularly primitive ancestor who had somehow stumbled into a gathering of gods. The amphitheater gradually filled with the incoming class of 2387. Sarah tried to count the different species represented but gave up after reaching 30. Some defied easy categorization, like the Flux, whose bodies seemed to exist in multiple phases of matter simultaneously, or the Ethereals, who appeared as vaguely humanoid collections of organized light. Commander Reichstall took the stage, her Veltar features sharp and commanding. She was a legend in the Defense Force, known for single-handedly stopping a Devourer incursion at the Battle of Kepler's Edge. Her scales had shifted to a deep purple that indicated formal authority. "Cadets," her voice carried effortlessly through the amphitheater without any apparent amplification. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy. You represent the finest specimens your species have to offer. You are here because you have demonstrated exceptional abilities that mark you as potential guardians of civilized space." Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Exceptional abilities. Every being in this amphitheater had been selected for powers or capabilities that marked them as extraordinary among their own kind. Vex Hay could manipulate crystalline structures at the molecular level. Thorak possessed strength that could crush starship hulls. The Zephyrian 3 rows ahead could generate electromagnetic fields powerful enough to disable electronics. And what could Sarah Chen from Backwater Earth do? She could start a fire with sticks and stones. She could purify water using sand and charcoal. She knew 17 different ways to make explosives from common household materials and could field dress a wound using nothing but cloth and plant matter. On Earth, these were survival skills. Here, among beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts, they seemed laughably primitive. "Your time here will test not only your natural abilities," Commander Yuxtal continued, "but your capacity to work as a team, to think strategically, and to adapt to situations that may stretch the boundaries of what you believe possible."
The galaxy faces threats that require more than individual power.
They require unity, creativity, and the willingness to see beyond the limitations of your own perspectives. The commander's gaze seemed to linger on Sarah for a moment, and she wondered if her acceptance had been some sort of administrative error. Earth had only recently made contact with the greater galactic community, and humanity's inclusion in the Defense Force had been controversial. "You will be organized into training squads of 5 cadets each," Commander Yuxtal announced. "These squads are carefully balanced to represent different strengths and capabilities. Your success will depend not on individual glory, but on your ability to function as a unified force." A holographic display materialized above the stage, showing squad assignments. Sarah watched the names appear, her heart sinking as she saw her assignment. Squad Nexus 7. Her squad mates were listed below her name, and each one represented a different flavor of impossibility. Kethmore, Vorthan Berserker, known for natural combat enhancement that allowed for superhuman strength, speed, and reaction time during battle states. Zara Lynn. Telepathic and telekinetic abilities allowing for mind-to-mind communication and object manipulation at considerable distance. Flux Singer of Seven Moons. Harmonic Manipulator. Could alter the fundamental frequency of matter, allowing for phasing through solid objects and vibrational attacks. And Sarah Chen. Human. Agricultural background. No listed special abilities. As the other cadets began to disperse to meet their squads, Sarah remained seated, staring at the holographic display. She could feel eyes on her from various directions, and she caught fragments of conversation in languages she was still learning. A human? In our class? I heard their homeworld is still classified as pre-industrial. Probably some sort of diplomatic gesture. They'll wash out in the first week. Sarah finally forced herself to stand and make her way to the designated meeting area for Squad Nexus 7. Her squad mates were already there, and the size difference was almost comical. Kethmore stood nearly 7 feet tall, his Vorthan physiology giving him the appearance of a humanoid shark with metallic skin and predatory eyes. Zara Lynn was more human-like in appearance, but carried herself with the unconscious confidence of someone who could read thoughts and move objects with her mind. Fluxinger was the most alien of the group, resembling a collection of Aurora Borealis given semi-solid form and purpose. So, Kethmore said, his voice carrying a slight growl that indicated amusement.
You're the human.
I've heard your species is known for being tenacious. It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't a compliment either. Sarah had learned enough about galactic politics to know that tenacious was often diplomat speak for too stubborn to know when they're outclassed.
I prefer persistent, Sarah replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice.
Zara Lynn's eyes briefly flashed with silver light, indicating telepathic activity. Sarah had been warned about this, and had practiced the mental exercises designed to maintain privacy around psychics. The psychic weaver frowned slightly, apparently unable to easily read her thoughts. Interesting, Zara Lynn murmured. Your mental discipline is better than expected. Fluxsinger's communication came as a harmonic vibration that Sarah felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. Her translation implant rendered it as, Curiosity query, what capabilities does the flesh-bound Earth-dweller possess for combat applications? All 3 of her squad mates were looking at her now, waiting for an answer. Sarah took a deep breath and decided that honesty was probably the best policy. I can make fire, she said simply. The silence that followed was profound. Kethmore's predatory features shifted to what might have been confusion. Zara Lynn's telepathic probing intensified, as if she was certain she had missed something important. Fluxsinger's harmonic emanations took on a questioning tone. Fire? Kethmore repeated slowly. You mean thermal generation? Plasma manipulation? Molecular excitation? No, Sarah said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. I mean fire, with sticks, or flint and steel, or chemical combinations. Regular fire. The silence stretched even longer. Finally, Zara Lynn spoke, her voice carefully neutral. That's very traditional. It was the galactic equivalent of calling someone charmingly primitive. Sarah had heard that tone before, usually right before someone explained why humans weren't quite ready for whatever they were being excluded from. Right, she said, forcing a smile. Traditional, that's me. Their first assignment was basic squad coordination exercises, designed to help them understand each other's capabilities and begin working as a team. They were given a series of scenarios that would require creative problem-solving and cooperation. The first scenario was straightforward. Navigate a maze-like obstacle course while carrying a fragile object from start to finish. The catch was that the maze would reconfigure itself every 60 seconds, and various environmental hazards would activate randomly throughout the course. Kethmore took point, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to spot and avoid the shifting walls and mechanical hazards. Zara Lynn provided telepathic coordination, keeping the team informed of changes in the maze structure that she could sense through her mental abilities. Fluxinger phased through barriers when necessary, scouting ahead and disabling energy-based traps through frequency manipulation. Sarah carried the package. It was humiliating. She jogged along behind her teammates, feeling like dead weight while they displayed abilities that seemed to bend the laws of physics. When they finished the course in record time, the praise went to the others while Sarah received polite acknowledgement for not slowing them down. The second scenario involved a simulated rescue mission. A crash shuttle needed to be reached through hostile terrain, survivors needed medical attention, and the team had to evacuate everyone before environmental conditions became lethal. Again, Sarah found herself in a support role. Cathmore's combat abilities cleared hostile wildlife. Zara Lynn's telekinesis moved debris, and her telepathy allowed communication with the injured, and Flux Singer's phasing abilities provided access to the crash shuttle's interior. Sarah applied basic first aid and helped carry stretchers. By the end of their first training day, the pattern was clear. Her squad mates were polite, professional, and completely convinced that she was the weak link that would hold them back. Sarah couldn't even argue with their assessment. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her dormitory room, staring out the window at the alien constellations. Her room was designed to accommodate human requirements, with Earth-standard atmosphere, gravity, and even a small hydroponics garden that provided familiar plants. It was thoughtful, but it also felt like a reminder that she needed special accommodations just to survive in an environment her squadmates found perfectly normal. She opened her personal datapad and began reviewing the next day's training scenarios. Tomorrow they would face the practical application assessment, where squads would be given a series of real-world problems to solve using only the resources available in a standard survival kit. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the academy. Finally, something that might play to her strengths. She began making a list of the contents of a standard galactic survival kit, cross-referencing it with what she remembered from the emergency supplies her father had taught her to use during camping trips in the Oregon mountains. Her father, who had served in the Marines before becoming a forest ranger, had drilled into her the importance of being able to survive with minimal resources. "It's not about having the best gear, sweetheart," he had told her during one particularly memorable weekend when their camping trip had turned into an actual survival situation due to unexpected weather. "It's about understanding what everything can be used for and being creative enough to see solutions that others miss." As Sarah reviewed the survival kit contents, she began to see possibilities that her squadmates might not consider. The water purification tablets could be used for more than just purification. The metallic emergency blankets could serve as reflectors or conductors. The basic tools could be combined in ways that might surprise beings who were used to solving problems with natural abilities rather than human ingenuity. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Sarah felt a spark of genuine confidence. Tomorrow, she would show her squadmates and instructors that humans might not have natural powers, but they had something else. The desperate creativity that came from evolving on a world that constantly tried to kill them. She pulled out a piece of paper and began sketching diagrams, working out the chemistry and physics of various combinations she might try. Fire from sand. That's what the assessment scenario would require, according to the briefing materials. Create fire using only sand and the contents of a survival kit. Every other species would approach this as an energy manipulation problem, trying to use their natural abilities to generate heat or manipulate matter. But Sarah saw it differently. Fire wasn't about power. Fire was about understanding chemical reactions, heat transfer, and the basic properties of matter. And Sarah Chen, daughter of a Marine-turned-forest ranger, had been starting fires since she was 8 years old. The practical application assessment arena looked like someone had taken pieces of a dozen different worlds and mashed them together in a cruel geological experiment. The testing ground stretched across several acres, divided into distinct environmental zones that would challenge different aspects of survival and problem-solving. Desert sand transitioned abruptly into rocky mountainous terrain, which gave way to a section of dense, alien forest before opening into a marshy wetland area that smelled of sulfur and decay. Sarah stood with Squad Nexus, 7 at the starting line, along with 19 other squads representing the cream of galactic military talent. The observation deck above them held instructors, senior cadets, and various dignitaries from the Galactic Defense Force. She could see Commander Yixtal among them, along with several other officers whose species she didn't recognize. Instructor Quindar, a Veltar with scales that shifted between purple and orange indicating controlled excitement, addressed the assembled cadets. Today's assessment will test your ability to work as a team under pressure, solve problems with limited resources, and demonstrate practical application of your training. Each squad will be given identical survival kits and a series of objectives that must be completed within the time limit. A holographic display materialized, showing the various challenge points scattered throughout the testing ground. Sarah counted 12 different objectives, ranging from basic shelter construction to what looked like some sort of rescue scenario involving simulated casualties. However, Instructor Quindar continued, his scales shifting to a warning shade of red. There is one objective that must be completed by all squads before any others may be attempted. In the center of the desert zone, you will find a circle of white sand. Using only the contents of your survival kit and materials found within that circle, you must create and maintain a fire for a minimum of 10 minutes. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembled cadets. For most species represented, fire creation was either a basic technological application or a simple matter of energy manipulation. The challenge seemed almost insultingly elementary. The sand in the circle has been treated to resist standard thermal manipulation, the instructor added, and the murmurs turned to expressions of concern.
Energy-based fire creation will not work.
You must find another way. Sarah felt her heart begin to race, but not with fear. With anticipation. She glanced at her squadmates and saw the worry beginning to form on their faces. Kethmore's predatory features had taken on a calculating expression. Zara Lynn's eyes were beginning to glow with silver light as she probed the testing area telepathically. Flux Singer's harmonic emanations carried notes of puzzlement. Additionally, Instructor Quindar's scales shifted to a deeper red. Squad rankings for this assessment will be determined primarily by successful completion of this first challenge. Speed of completion will be the tiebreaker. The survival kits were distributed by hovering service drones. Sarah opened hers immediately, inventorying the contents while her squadmates discussed strategy in low voices. Standard water purification tablets, metallic emergency blankets, basic cutting tools, a small coil of synthetic rope, compressed nutrition bars, a simple first aid kit, and a few other basic items that any stranded spacer might need to survive until rescue arrived. To most beings in the galaxy, these were emergency supplies. To Sarah, they were a chemistry set. "All right," Kethmore said, taking charge as he usually did. "We need to figure out how to approach this. Without energy manipulation, fire creation becomes significantly more complex." "I could try to use telekinesis to create friction," Zara Lynn suggested. "Rapid movement of materials against each other might generate enough heat." Flux Singer's response came as a concerned harmonic. "Query uncertainty. Without frequency manipulation of molecular structure, thermal generation problematic." Sarah looked up from her inventory. "Actually," she said quietly, "I think I can handle this one." Her squadmates turned to look at her with expressions that ranged from skeptical to confused. Kethmore's features shifted to what she had learned indicated polite doubt. "Sarah," he said carefully, "this isn't just making a campfire. The sand has been specifically treated to resist energy-based solutions. It's going to require creative problem-solving." "I understand," Sarah replied, standing and shouldering her survival kit. "Trust me on this one." The starting signal echoed across the testing ground, and squads began moving toward their first objective. Most headed directly for the desert zone, intent on tackling the fire challenge immediately. Sarah led her squad in the same direction, but she took a slightly different route that led them past the edge of the alien forest zone. "Where are you going?" Zara Lynn asked, jogging to keep up. "The challenge point is that way." Sarah paused at the tree line, scanning the alien vegetation. The forest contained plant life from several different worlds, creating a diverse ecosystem that included both familiar and exotic species. She spotted what she was looking for, a cluster of crystalline formations that resembled Earth's quartz, and nearby a grove of trees with bark that looked suspiciously like birch. "Gathering materials," Sarah replied, pulling out her cutting tool and approaching the birch-like trees. "The instructor said we could only use materials found within the circle," Kethmore pointed out. "No," Sarah corrected, carefully peeling strips of the papery bark. "He said we could only use the contents of our survival kit and materials found within the circle. He didn't say we couldn't bring other materials to the circle." She moved to the crystalline formations and selected several pieces of different sizes, testing their hardness against each other. The smaller pieces were softer, similar to limestone, while the larger ones were harder, more like flint. Her squadmates watched in growing confusion as Sarah gathered her materials, strips of bark, several pieces of crystal, and what appeared to be dried moss from the base of the trees. "Sarah," Zara Lynn said slowly, "what exactly are you planning to do with tree bark and rocks?" Sarah straightened, her arms full of materials. "Make fire," she said simply, and headed toward the desert zone. By the time they reached the challenge circle, several other squads were already there, and Sarah could see the frustration building on alien faces as various energy-based solutions failed to work. The treated sand absorbed and dispersed energy attacks, telepathic heat manipulation, and even direct plasma generation without producing so much as a spark. The circle itself was about 10 meters in diameter, filled with fine white sand, that had an almost crystalline appearance. In the center stood a small metal tripod designed to hold whatever fire the cadets managed to create. Sarah walked to the edge of the circle and knelt, examining the sand more closely. It was definitely treated with some sort of energy-dampening field, but it was still sand, silicon dioxide with various mineral inclusions, just like the beach sand she had played in as a child. She set down her gathered materials and opened her survival kit, pulling out several specific items. The water purification tablets went into one pile, the cutting tool in another, and she unfolded one of the metallic emergency blankets completely. "Okay," she said to her squad mates. "I'm going to need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly. This is going to look weird, but it will work." Cathmore crossed his arms, his predatory features skeptical. "Sarah, I appreciate your confidence, but maybe we should try some other approaches first. Zara Lynn's friction idea might—" "No time," Sarah interrupted, glancing at the other squads. "Look around. Everyone else is going to try variations of the same energy-based solutions. They're thinking like advanced beings with evolved abilities. They need to think like primitives." She began working as she spoke, using her cutting tool to scrape one of the softer crystals against one of the harder ones, collecting the powder in a small pile on the emergency blanket. The technique was something her father had taught her during one of their wilderness expeditions, when their lighter had failed and they needed to start a cooking fire. "The sand is treated to resist energy manipulation," Sarah continued, working steadily, "but it's still just sand, silicon dioxide. And these crystals contain iron oxide and magnesium." She crushed one of the water purification tablets and added the powder to her growing mixture. "Potassium permanganate. And this," she held up a tube from the first aid kit, "is glycerin." Zara Lynn's eyes widened as she began to understand. "You're making a chemical reaction." "Thermite," Sarah confirmed. "Well, a variation of it. The iron oxide and aluminum powder from the crystal dust, potassium permanganate as an oxidizer, and glycerin as a catalyst." She used her cutting tool to create a small depression in the sand near the tripod. "Cathmore, I need you to help me gather some of this sand into a small pile here." "Zara Lynn, can you use telekinesis to help me mix these powders more evenly? Fuchsinger, I need you to create a small windbreak around the circle. This reaction is going to be fast and hot." Her squad mates moved to help, still looking uncertain but beginning to trust her confidence. Around the circle, other squads were still struggling with increasingly complex energy manipulation techniques. Sarah finished her preparation by creating a small nest of the shredded bark in the depression, surrounded by a carefully constructed pyramid of sand, mixed with small pieces of the crystalline material. She placed her chemical mixture at the very center, then used the emergency blanket to create a reflective shield that would help direct the heat. "Everyone step back," she warned, pulling a second emergency blanket over herself like a shield. "This is going to be bright and hot." She used her cutting tool to scrape the hardest piece of crystal against the metal edge of the first aid kit, creating a shower of sparks directly onto her chemical mixture. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. A brilliant flare of white-hot light erupted from the center of her sand pile, accompanied by a sharp chemical smell and a burst of heat that could be felt even through the emergency blanket. The chemical fire ignited the bark, which in turn lit the specially prepared sand and crystal mixture. Within seconds, a steady orange flame was crackling cheerfully in the depression, fed by the chemical reaction and the carefully arranged combustible materials. The arena fell silent. Every cadet, instructor, and observer was staring at the impossible sight of a human creating fire from sand using nothing but basic survival supplies and primitive chemistry. Sarah lowered her emergency blanket shield and grinned at her stunned squad mates. "Told you I could make fire." The timer showed that Squad Nexus 7 had completed the first challenge in under 4 minutes. The next fastest squad was still working on their 7th failed attempt at energy manipulation. Instructor Quindar's scales had shifted to a color Sarah had never seen before, a rapid cycling between orange, purple, and blue that might have indicated complete bewilderment. Commander Eukstal was leaning forward in her observation seat, her Veltar features intense with interest. "How?" Cathmore asked, staring at the fire as if it might disappear if he looked away. "Chemistry," Sarah replied, beginning to pack up her remaining materials. "Most advanced species stopped thinking about chemical reactions when they developed energy manipulation abilities, but humans never had those abilities, so we had to get really good at understanding how different materials interact at the molecular level." Zara Lynn's telepathic probe touched Sarah's mind, gentler this time and clearly asking permission. Sarah allowed the contact, sharing the memory of her father teaching her basic wilderness chemistry during their camping trips. The psychic weaver's eyes widened as she experienced the memory. Your people teach this to children? Basic survival skills, Sarah confirmed. My dad always said you never know when you might need to make do with what you have. Flux Singer's harmonic emanations carried notes of what Sarah was beginning to recognize as respect, appreciation, acknowledgement. Flesh-bound Earth Dweller possesses knowledge base previously unrecognized. More squads were beginning to gather around their fire. Staring at the steady flame with expressions of amazement and confusion, Sarah could hear fragments of conversation in multiple languages. How is that possible? The sand is treated specifically to prevent this. Did you see how fast that reaction was? I'd never seen chemical fire creation at that speed. Squad Vortex 1, 2, consisting of some of the most elite energy manipulators in the class, approached their circle. Their leader, a Zephyrian named Skrillinth, whose wings were currently showing stress patterns, addressed Sarah directly. Human, his translation came through as barely controlled frustration. We have been attempting thermal generation for 23 minutes. Our combined abilities should be more than sufficient for this task. How did you succeed where we have failed? Sarah looked at the elegant Zephyrian, with his gossamer wings and natural bioelectric abilities, and felt a moment of sympathy. They were trying to solve a primitive problem with advanced techniques, like trying to write a letter with a particle accelerator. You're thinking too hard, she said gently. This isn't about power or advanced abilities. It's about understanding what materials you have and how they can work together. Fire is just rapid oxidation. You create the right chemical conditions, provide ignition, and feed the reaction. She gestured to her still-burning fire. The sand isn't just sand. It contains minerals that can be separated and used. The survival kit isn't just emergency supplies. Every item has multiple potential applications. You just have to think about what each thing actually is, chemically and physically, rather than what it's supposed to be used for. Skrillinth's wing patterns shifted to what might have been thoughtful consideration. Your species approaches problems from a material manipulation perspective rather than energy manipulation. We approach problems from a figure-it-out-or-die perspective, Sarah corrected. Earth is what galactic surveys classify as a Class 7 hazardous world. Nearly everything on it is trying to kill you, from the weather to the wildlife to the geological activity. Humans got good at improvisation because the alternative was extinction. A new voice cut through the conversation. Cadet Chen. Commander Yixtal had descended from the observation deck and was approaching their circle, her Veltar features unreadable. Sarah straightened to attention, suddenly aware that she might have overstepped some boundaries she wasn't aware of.
Yes, Commander. Walk with me, the commander ordered, and Sarah felt her stomach drop.
She glanced at her squad mates, who looked as worried as she felt. They walked away from the crowd of cadets and observers, stopping near the edge of the testing ground where they could speak privately. Commander Gegstyle studied Sarah for a long moment, her scales shifting through several colors that Sarah couldn't interpret. Cadet Chen, the commander said finally, in my 40 years of service in the Galactic Defense Force, I have never seen a first-year cadet solve the fire challenge in under 10 minutes, let alone under 5. Sarah's heart sank. I'm sorry, Commander. I didn't realize there were restrictions on. You're not in trouble. Commander Yixtal interrupted, her scale shifting to what Sarah hoped was amusement. I'm curious. The fire challenge was specifically designed to be unsolvable through conventional energy manipulation techniques. It was created to teach cadets about the limitations of relying solely on natural abilities and the importance of creative thinking. She paused, studying Sarah's fire, which was still burning steadily in its sand depression. In the 15 years we've been using this challenge, the record completion time was 37 minutes, achieved by a squad that managed to create a crude friction-based ignition system. Most squads require multiple attempts and significant hints from instructors. Sarah didn't know what to say to that, so she remained silent. Tell me, Cadet Chen, what other primitive techniques does your species employ that might surprise us? The question was clearly a test of some kind, but Sarah wasn't sure what kind. She decided to answer honestly. Water purification using sand and charcoal filtration. Explosive creation using common agricultural materials. Navigation without technological assistance. Wound treatment using plant-based materials. Food preservation without refrigeration. Shelter construction using only environmental materials. She paused, thinking. Basically, everything you need to survive and thrive without any technology more advanced than basic tools. Commander Ixtal's scales shifted to a deep blue that Sarah had learned indicated serious contemplation. And these skills are commonly taught to your young? Basic versions, yes. My father was military, so I got more comprehensive training than most. but every human child learns basic survival skills. We call it camping. The commander was quiet for a long moment, staring at the fire. Finally, she spoke again. Cadet Chen, I want you to prepare a demonstration for tomorrow's tactical theory class. Choose 3 techniques that you think would be most useful in a military context. You'll be presenting to the entire first-year class. Sarah felt her eyes widen. A demonstration, Commander? The Galactic Defense Force is always interested in new approaches to problem-solving, Commander Yixtal replied. Your species may have something valuable to contribute beyond what we initially recognized. As they walked back toward the testing ground, Sarah could see that her fire was still burning strong while most other squads had barely managed to create sparks. Her squad mates were waiting for her with expressions of concern and curiosity. Everything all right? Kethmore asked as she rejoined them. Sarah looked at her squad, then at the fire she had created from sand and survival supplies, then at the dozens of alien cadets who were still struggling with the challenge that had taken her less than 5 minutes. Yeah, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. I think everything is going to be just fine. The tactical theory auditorium was packed beyond capacity. Word of Sarah's fire-making demonstration had spread through the academy like wildfire, and cadets from all 4 years had crowded into the massive amphitheater to witness what many were calling either a revolutionary moment or an elaborate hoax. The overflow crowd stood along the walls and filled the aisles, creating a sea of alien faces all focused on the small human standing at the center of the presentation area. Sarah tried to ignore the hundreds of eyes, optical sensors, and various other perception organs focused on her as she arranged her demonstration materials. She had spent the previous evening carefully selecting 3 techniques that would showcase human problem-solving while being practical for military applications. Her hands were steady as she laid out the supplies, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Commander Yuxtal stood at the front of the faculty section, her scales a neutral purple that gave away nothing of her expectations. Beside her sat General Krexalon, a massive Krolix, whose presence indicated that Sarah's demonstration had attracted attention from the highest levels of the academy. Other instructors filled out the faculty seating, representing species Sarah had only read about in her xenobiology texts. In the front rows of student seating, she could see her squad mates. Kethmore's predatory features showed what she had learned to recognize as anticipatory interest. Zara Lynn's eyes held their characteristic silver glow, indicating active telepathic monitoring of the room's emotional atmosphere. Fluxinger's harmonic emanations carried notes of supportive confidence that made Sarah feel slightly less terrified. But it was the expressions on the other cadets' faces that really caught her attention. There was skepticism, certainly, but also genuine curiosity. The fire challenge had shaken many assumptions about human capabilities, and now everyone wanted to see what other surprises humanity might have in store. Cadets. Commander Yixtal's voice carried effortlessly through the auditorium. You are here to witness a demonstration of alternative problem-solving techniques. Cadet Chen will be showing us 3 human methodologies that may have applications in tactical situations. I expect respectful attention and thoughtful questions. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. Thank you, Commander. Before I begin, I want to explain the context behind what I'm going to show you. Humans evolved on what the Galactic Survey classifies as a Class 7 hazardous world. This classification means that the planet actively tries to kill its inhabitants through weather, geology, biology, and chemical processes. We didn't develop natural energy manipulation or enhanced physical abilities. Instead, we developed something else, the ability to turn anything around us into a tool or weapon. She gestured to her demonstration table, which was covered with materials that looked like random junk to most observers. What I'm going to show you are applications of what we call appropriate technology, using the simplest effective solution to solve complex problems. Sarah picked up her first set of materials. A container of water, some sand from the Academy's landscaping, several pieces of cloth from torn uniforms, and what appeared to be crushed charcoal from the Academy's waste recycling system. The first demonstration is water purification without technological assistance. In combat situations, clean water sources may be contaminated, destroyed, or unavailable. Most species would rely on purification technology or natural abilities to make water safe to drink. She began assembling what looked like a crude layered system using the cloth, sand, and charcoal. This is a biological water filter. The cloth provides physical filtration for large particles. The sand creates mechanical filtration for smaller contaminants. The charcoal provides chemical filtration that removes toxins, bacteria, and many poisons. Sarah poured muddy water into the top of her improvised system. What came out the bottom was clear and clean. She took a drink without hesitation, and a murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. The total construction time is under 5 minutes using materials that can be found almost anywhere. No power source required, no technology that can break down or be disabled by enemy action, and effective against most biological and chemical contaminants. A Zephyrian in the third row raised a gossamer wing. Cadet Chen, what about radiological contamination?
Different technique for that, Sarah replied.
Clay-based absorption if you can find suitable minerals, or distillation using solar heating and condensation surfaces. Humans have developed water purification techniques for almost every type of contamination because we didn't have the luxury of assuming our water sources were safe. General Crexelon leaned forward, his massive frame creaking the reinforced chair. His voice rumbled like an earthquake when he spoke. Cadet, in a combat situation, how long would this filtration system continue to function? Depends on usage and contamination levels, sir, Sarah replied. The charcoal layer would need replacement every few days with heavy use, but the basic system could function indefinitely as long as you could find replacement materials, and the materials exist on virtually every inhabited world. She moved to her second demonstration, which involved a collection of common household items that she had gathered from various academy facilities, cleaning supplies, metal components from broken equipment, and several types of plant matter from the hydroponics labs. The second demonstration is improvised explosive device creation using commonly available materials. The auditorium went dead silent. Several instructors leaned forward with sudden interest, and Sarah could see security personnel shifting position near the exits. Before anyone gets concerned, Sarah added quickly, I'm not actually going to detonate anything. This is a theoretical demonstration of component assembly. She held up a bottle of cleaning solution. Ammonium nitrate, commonly found in cleaning products and fertilizers. She gestured to the metal components. Aluminum powder, found in paint and various industrial applications. Next came plant materials, organic binding agents and natural accelerants. Sarah began assembling the components in a careful sequence, explaining the chemical processes involved without actually creating a functional explosive. The key principle is understanding how common materials can be combined to create energy release. Humans developed these techniques because we often faced threats that were larger, stronger, and better armed than we were. Asymmetric warfare became a survival necessity. The Veltar instructor raised her hand. Cadet Chen, are you saying that any human could create weapons from common materials? Any human with basic chemistry knowledge, yes. It's part of standard education in many regions of Earth. We call it applied science, but it could also be called how to fight, when you have nothing but your brain and whatever's lying around. The implications of that statement rippled through the audience like a wave. Sarah could see alien faces processing the idea that humans had spent millennia developing techniques for turning everyday objects into weapons.
Of course, Sarah continued, the same principles apply to constructive applications.
Chemistry is chemistry, whether you're making explosives or medicine, cleaning supplies or building materials. General Crexlon's rumbling voice filled the auditorium again. Cadet, what level of explosive force could be achieved using these techniques? Sarah considered her answer carefully. That would depend on available materials and time for preparation, sir. Hypothetically, anywhere from small anti-personnel charges to structure demolition level force. Humans have a saying, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand and I can move the world. We apply that philosophy to problem solving in general. She moved to her final demonstration, which consisted of materials that looked completely innocuous. Plant fibers, clay from the Academy's ceramic workshop, metal wire from electronics repair, and what appeared to be common stones. The third demonstration is communication and navigation without technological assistance. In electronic warfare situations, standard communication and navigation systems may be compromised or destroyed. Sarah began weaving the plant fibers into a complex pattern that slowly revealed itself as a three-dimensional map of the Academy grounds. Textile-based information storage. This technique allows for complex data to be encoded in fabric patterns that appear decorative to casual observation. Maps, troop movements, supply caches, tactical plans, all can be recorded in ways that survive physical damage and remain undetectable to most scanning systems. The intricate weaving was taking shape as she spoke, creating a miniature replica of the Academy's layout complete with elevation markers and structural details. The precision was remarkable considering she was working with rough plant fibers and no measuring tools. Additionally, she continued, working on a second piece, natural navigation techniques using astronomical observation, wind patterns, geological features, and biological indicators allow for accurate position determination and route planning without any technology that can be detected or disrupted. Sarah held up the completed textile map and a compass she had constructed from a magnetized piece of metal wire floating in a water-filled bowl. Total construction time for navigation aids approximately 15 minutes. Accuracy. Sufficient for tactical operations over distances up to several hundred kilometers. A voice from the back of the auditorium called out, "But why would you need these techniques when we have advanced technology?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time since starting her demonstration, she felt completely confident in her answer. Because, Cadet, advanced technology can be taken away from you. It can be destroyed, disabled, or turned against you by enemies with superior resources. But knowledge? She tapped her temple. Knowledge lives in your mind. Skills live in your hands. And the ability to solve problems using whatever materials are available, that's something no enemy can ever take away from you. The auditorium was quiet for a long moment as the implications of her words sank in. Then General Krexelin stood, his massive frame causing several cadets to crane their necks to see over him. Cadet Chen, his voice carried the authority of absolute command. These techniques you've demonstrated, how many humans possess such knowledge? Sarah thought about her answer. In varying degrees, sir. Most of them. What I've shown you are basic applications of principles that human children learn in school. Chemistry, physics, biology, engineering. We don't just learn the theory, we learn how to apply it with limited resources because that's how our species survived long enough to develop technology. And more advanced applications? Exist, sir. Much more advanced. Sarah glanced around the auditorium, seeing the rapt attention on hundreds of alien faces. Human military forces have entire divisions dedicated to improvised problem-solving. We call them engineers, but they're really professional MacGyvers. MacGyvers? Commander Yuxtal asked. Cultural reference, Commander. Someone who can solve any problem using whatever materials are at hand, no matter how unlikely the combination. Sarah paused. Humans consider this normal behavior. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could see minds working throughout the auditorium, processing the implications of a species that had developed universal improvisation as a survival trait. Finally, a senior cadet from the fourth-year class stood up. Cadet Chen, are you saying that humans view the entire universe as a collection of raw materials for problem-solving? Sarah considered the question seriously.
Yes, I suppose we do.
We look at any situation and ask ourselves, what do I have? What do I need? How can I turn the first into the second? It's not a conscious process most of the time. It's just how we think. General Krexlon exchanged a look with Commander Yuxtal that Sarah couldn't interpret. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. Cadet Chen, I want you to prepare a comprehensive curriculum proposal. The Academy may be interested in adding human problem-solving methodologies to our standard training program. The auditorium erupted in excited chatter as cadets began discussing what they had witnessed. Sarah could hear fragments of conversation in multiple languages. Did you see how quickly she constructed that navigation system? The explosive chemistry was incredibly elegant. I want to learn the textile mapping technique.
How many other human techniques are there?
Sarah began packing up her demonstration materials, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the response. Her squad mates approached the presentation area, their expressions ranging from amazed to thoughtful. Sarah, Kethmore said, his predatory features showing what she now recognized as genuine admiration. I believe I owe you an apology. When you said you could make fire, I thought you meant something simpler. Zaralin's telepathic touch was gentle as she shared her perception of the audience's emotional response, wonder, excitement, and a healthy dose of concern, as beings throughout the auditorium began to understand the implications of human adaptability. Flux Singer's harmonic communication carried complex overtones. Inquiry respect. How many more knowledge techniques does flesh-bound Earth-dweller species possess? Sarah looked at her squad mates, then at the crowd of cadets still discussing her demonstration, then at the faculty members who were engaged in what appeared to be intense discussion with General Krexlon.
Honestly, she said,
we're just getting started. As they left the auditorium, Sarah overheard one conversation that made her smile. I heard that humans have a technique for starting fires using just sand. That's impossible. I thought so too, but I saw it with my own eyes.
What else can they do? I don't know, but I'm starting to think we should probably find out.
Sarah walked a little taller as she headed back to her dormitory. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she belonged, not as a primitive being who had been granted admission out of diplomatic courtesy, but as a representative of a species that had something valuable to contribute to the galaxy. The best part was that everything she had shown them really was basic. Human children learned these techniques because they were the foundation of everything else. And if the Galactic Defense Academy was interested in human problem-solving methodologies, they were going to be amazed when they discovered what human engineers could do when they really put their minds to it. After all, this was a species that had figured out how to split atoms, leave their home planet, and communicate across interstellar distances using nothing but curiosity, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. Sarah was looking forward to showing them what humans could do when they really got creative. The emergency alarms that screamed through the Galactic Defense Academy at 0347 hours were not part of any scheduled drill. Sarah jolted awake in her dormitory bed, her heart immediately racing as the red warning lights bathed her room in hellish illumination. The Academy's emergency broadcast system crackled to life, Commander Yaxtal's voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. All cadets report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. We have multiple hostile contacts approaching the Nexus Prime system. All cadets report to emergency stations. Sarah was moving before the announcement finished, pulling on her uniform and grabbing her emergency kit with the automatic efficiency her father had drilled into her during countless pre-dawn emergency preparedness exercises. Around her, other cadets were stumbling through their dormitory corridors, many still disoriented by the sudden awakening. The academy transformed into organized chaos as thousands of cadets flowed through corridors toward their assigned emergency positions. Sarah's squad was assigned to Tactical Support Station 7, located in one of the Academy's reinforced command bunkers. As they ran through the corridors, she could see through the massive transparasteel windows that the Academy's defensive systems were coming online. Energy shields shimmered into existence around critical facilities, and automated weapon platforms rose from hidden positions. Squad Nexus 7 reached their station to find Senior Cadet Thisara, a fourth-year ethereal whose energy-based form was crackling with stress patterns, coordinating with a dozen other squads in their section. Status report, Cathmore demanded, his combat instincts taking over. Thisara's form shifted to a deeper blue as she consulted multiple holographic displays simultaneously. Unknown hostiles detected at the edge of the system. Configuration suggests either pirates or raiders, but the energy signatures don't match any known species. Academy Defense Fleet is moving to intercept, but we're the primary target. The tactical displays showed a terrifying picture. 12 unknown vessels were approaching in a coordinated formation that spoke of military precision rather than random piracy. Their ships were sleek, predatory things that seemed designed to inspire fear as much as to fight. Estimated arrival time? Sarah then asked, her telepathic abilities already reaching out to coordinate with other psychics in the command center. 4 hours, Thisara replied. But there's more. Long-range sensors detect weapon signatures that suggest these aren't conventional raiders. Their technology appears to be specifically designed to counter standard galactic defense systems. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Anti-technology warfare? Exactly. Thisar's energy form flickered with what might have been fear, MPM weapons, signal jammers, energy dampeners. Everything they're carrying suggests they know exactly how to fight beings who rely on advanced technology and natural abilities. The implications hit everyone at the same time. The Academy's cadets were selected for their exceptional natural abilities. Energy manipulation, telepathy, enhanced physical capabilities. But what happened when those abilities were neutralized? General Crexelon's massive form materialized in the command center, his rocky hide gleaming under the emergency lighting. Tactical assessment, he rumbled, without preamble. Sir, Thisara's form shifted to faunal purple. Hostile forces appear to be equipped specifically to counter standard defense force capabilities. Our preliminary assessment suggests they've studied our tactical doctrines and developed countermeasures. Casualties? Unknown yet, sir. But if they succeed in neutralizing our technological and natural ability advantages, she didn't need to finish the sentence. General Crexelon's crystalline eyes swept the assembled cadets. All squads prepare for emergency evacuation protocols. This academy contains the future leadership of the Defense Force. You are not expendable. Sir, Sarah's voice cut through the command center before she could stop herself. Every head turned toward her, and she felt the familiar weight of being the only human in a room full of advanced aliens. Speak, Cadet Chen. Sarah took a deep breath. Sir, if these hostiles are equipped to counter advanced technology and natural abilities, they're probably not prepared to counter techniques they've never seen before. The general's massive form shifted slightly. Explain. Human techniques, sir. The improvised problem-solving methods we discussed yesterday? If they've studied standard defense force tactics, they won't know how to counter approaches they've never encountered. Commander Yixtal entered the command center at that moment. Her Veltar features grim. General, Defense Fleet reports that hostile weapons are indeed designed to neutralize our standard capabilities. Energy shields are being disrupted, psychic coordination is being jammed, and several ships have been disabled by what appears to be targeted EMP attacks. How long until they reach the Academy? The general asked. 3 hours, 17 minutes. Sarah stepped forward. General, give me access to the Academy's fabrication facilities and raw materials storage, and I need volunteers.
Cadets who are willing to learn human techniques quickly.
Cadet Chen, this is not the time for training exercises, Commander Yixtal said sharply. It's not a training exercise, Commander. It's our best chance. Sarah's voice was steady despite the fear hammering in her chest. These hostiles have prepared to fight the defense force as they know it. They haven't prepared to fight an improvised defense using techniques they've never seen. General Krexlon studied her for a long moment. What do you need? Access to chemistry labs, fabrication equipment, raw materials, and every cadet who's willing to think like a human for the next 3 hours. The general's rumbling voice carried across the command center. Attention all cadets. Voluntary participation in emergency defensive preparations. Report to Cadet Chen for instructions. He fixed Sarah with a stare that could have cracked granite. Cadet, you have 3 hours to turn this academy into something our enemies have never seen before. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of organized chaos that would have made Sarah's father proud. She divided the volunteer cadets into teams based on capabilities and available materials, turning the entire academy into a massive improvisation workshop. Team Alpha, led by Kethmore, focused on creating improvised explosive devices using materials from the chemistry labs. The Vorthan's natural aggression made him surprisingly good at understanding the principles of asymmetric warfare, and soon he was teaching other cadets how to turn cleaning supplies and fertilizer into devastating anti-personnel weapons. Team Beta, coordinated by Zara Lin, worked on communication and navigation systems that functioned without technology. The Psychic Weaver's telepathic abilities let her quickly share techniques across multiple cadets simultaneously, creating a network of beings who could maintain coordination even if all electronic systems were disabled. Team Gamma, guided by Fluxinger, created concealment and misdirection systems using natural materials. The harmonic manipulator's understanding of frequency and vibration translated surprisingly well to understanding how to hide heat signatures and disrupt sensor systems using nothing but physics and chemistry. Sarah moved between teams, teaching, correcting, and adapting techniques on the fly. She showed a group of Zephyrians how to use their natural flight abilities to deploy improvised incendiary devices. She taught Krolek's cadets how their mineral-based physiology could be used to create natural camouflage systems. She worked with Veltar cadets to develop close combat techniques that relied on improvised weapons rather than energy manipulation. But it was the psychological preparation that might have been most important. Sarah gathered all the volunteer cadets in the main fabrication facility and addressed them directly. I need you to understand something, she said, standing on a fabrication platform so she could be seen by everyone. For the next few hours, you're not advanced beings with evolved abilities. You're not representatives of superior galactic civilization. You're humans, the assembled cadets. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species listened intently. Humans are what happens when evolution takes a species that should have gone extinct and gives them just enough intelligence to be stubborn about it. We don't have energy manipulation, so we learned chemistry. We don't have natural armor, so we learned to make weapons. We don't have telepathy, so we learned to communicate with gestures and symbols that our enemies couldn't intercept.
Sarah gestured to the improvised weapons and devices that now filled the fabrication facility.
What you're learning today are techniques that my species developed because we didn't have any choice.
Every human technique exists because at some point a human was faced with a problem that should have killed them, and they decided to solve it instead. She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. These hostiles are coming here because they think they know how to fight us. They've studied our technology, our natural abilities, our standard tactics. They're prepared for everything except one thing, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. A young ethereal raised a shimmering appendage. Cadet Chen, what if our improvised techniques aren't sufficient? Sarah smiled grimly. Then we improvise better techniques. That's what humans do. We keep solving problems until we run out of problems or we run out of humans. And we never ever give up. The hostile fleet arrived exactly on schedule, their sleek ships dropping out of hyperspace in a formation that spoke of military precision and overwhelming confidence. The Academy's long-range sensors showed them deploying in a classic siege pattern, designed to prevent escape while systematically neutralizing defenses. Sarah watched from the command center as the first wave of attacks began. EMP pulses disabled the Academy's primary shield generators. Signal jamming cut off communication with the defense fleet. Energy dampening fields neutralized the natural abilities of most defenders. And then the Academy began to fight back in ways the hostiles had never seen before. The first surprise came when what appeared to be decorative landscaping around the Academy perimeter erupted in coordinated explosions. The hostile ground forces that had expected to advance through manicured gardens instead found themselves in the middle of a minefield created from fertilizer, cleaning supplies, and timer devices built from classroom electronics. The second surprise came when their sensor systems began reporting impossible readings as camouflage positions appeared and disappeared using techniques that relied on physics rather than technology. Heat masking systems built from natural materials. Visual concealment using adaptive chemistry. Sound dampening using harmonic interference created by teams of cadets working in coordination. The third surprise came when their communication interception systems completely failed to decode Academy coordination signals, because those signals were being transmitted through textile patterns, gesture languages, and chemical markers that no known military database contained information about. But the biggest surprise came when the hostile forces reached the Academy's main buildings and discovered that every corridor, room, and facility had been turned into an improvised fortress defended by beings who fought like cornered humans. Sarah found herself in Corridor 7, dealt with a mixed group of cadets from multiple species, all armed with weapons they had built in the past 3 hours. The approaching hostiles were humanoid but wrong somehow, their movements too precise and their equipment too perfect for any known species. Remember, Sarah whispered to her team, they're expecting energy weapons and natural abilities. They're not expecting chemical warfare. The hostiles entered the corridor with military precision, their advanced armor gleaming and their weapons tracking for targets. They advanced in perfect formation, exactly as their training had taught them. Right into the chemical trap that Sarah had spent the last hour preparing. The reaction was spectacular. Homemade smoke grenades filled the corridor with dense, choking fog that interfered with both visual and electronic sensors. Improvised flashbangs created disorienting sensory overload. And then the Academy cadets attacked using weapons and techniques that no military database in the galaxy contained information about. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the hostile fleet was either destroyed or in retreat, and the Galactic Defense Academy had become the site of the most unusual military victory in recorded galactic history. General Krexelon found Sarah in the medical center, where she was being treated for minor injuries sustained during the corridor fighting. His massive form had several new scratches and dents that spoke of his own participation in the battle. "Cadet Chen," he rumbled. "Preliminary casualty reports show minimal Academy losses despite facing superior numbers and technology. Care to explain how that was possible?" Sarah looked up from the medical scanner that was examining her various cuts and bruises. "Human thinking, sir. When you can't fight fair, you fight smart. When you can't fight smart, you fight dirty. And when you can't fight dirty, you change the rules of the fight entirely." The general's crystalline eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement. "And which approach did we use today?" "All of them, sir." He was quiet for a moment, processing that answer. Finally, he spoke again. "Cadet Chen, how long would it take to train our entire defense force in these human techniques?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "That depends, sir. How long do you have and how human do you want them to think?" General Krexlon's rumbling laugh filled the medical center. "I suspect, Cadet, that we're going to find out." As news of the Academy's victory spread through the galactic communication networks, Sarah realized that humanity's role in the greater galaxy was about to change dramatically. They had proven that advanced technology and evolved abilities weren't the only paths to victory. Sometimes, the greatest advantage was simply the willingness to solve problems using whatever materials were at hand, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had always known. There was no such thing as an unsolvable problem, only insufficient creativity in finding the solution. 6 months after what galactic historians were already calling the Nexus Prime incident, Sarah Chen stood before the assembled High Council of the Galactic Defense Force in the Great Dome Chamber on Central Command Station. The massive space was filled with representatives from every member species of the galactic community, their various forms creating a living testament to the diversity of intelligent life in the known universe. But today they were all focused on one small human. Sarah wore the midnight blue uniform of a newly commissioned Defense Force lieutenant with the distinctive golden chevrons that marked her as a specialist in asymmetric tactical operations, a military classification that had been created specifically for humans and their unique approach to problem solving. Her shoulder bore the insignia of the newly formed Human Integration Corps, Earth's official military contribution to galactic defense. Supreme Chancellor Vexthal, an ancient ethereal whose energy form had been shaped by centuries of diplomatic service, spoke first. His voice resonated through the chamber with the weight of absolute authority. Lieutenant Chen, your species has presented us with a fundamental challenge to our understanding of military science. The techniques demonstrated during the Academy crisis have forced us to reconsider basic assumptions about warfare, defense, and the nature of technological superiority. Sarah stood at attention, her hands clasped behind her back. Around the chamber, she could see familiar faces from the Academy. Her former squadmates sat in the junior officers section, all now commissioned as specialists in human hybrid tactical operations. Commander Yixtal occupied a seat among the senior staff, her Veltar features displaying the deep blue of professional pride. General Krexlon's massive form dominated one entire section of the military leadership area. Your species claims, the Chancellor continued, that the techniques demonstrated at the Academy represent only basic applications of human problem-solving methodology. Is this assessment accurate? Sarah had been dreading this question, but she had also been preparing for it since the day of the attack. Yes, Supreme Chancellor, the techniques we used were equivalent to what human children learn in basic education. Advanced applications exist that are significantly more comprehensive. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Representative Thisnol of the Zephyrian Collective raised one gossamer wing. Lieutenant, could you provide examples of these more advanced applications? Sarah glanced at General Krexelon, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had discussed this moment extensively over the past months. Representative Thisnol, human military engineers have developed techniques for turning entire planetary ecosystems into defensive networks. Urban environments can be converted into three-dimensional combat zones, where every building, street, and utility system becomes a weapon or tactical advantage. We've created stealth technologies that rely on biological camouflage rather than energy manipulation. And we've developed psychological warfare techniques that can neutralize enemy morale without firing a shot. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could see alien minds throughout the chamber processing the implications of a species that viewed entire worlds as potential tool sets. Additionally, she continued, humans have developed what we call technological aikido, techniques for turning an enemy's advanced systems against themselves. We don't try to match superior technology. We find ways to make it work for us, instead of for them. Supreme Chancellor Vextal's energy form shifted to deeper purple, indicating serious contemplation. Lieutenant Chen, your preliminary reports suggest that human techniques could revolutionize Defense Force capabilities. However, there are concerns about the philosophical implications of such approaches. Here it was. The question Sarah had been expecting since the first day she demonstrated fire-making from sand. Supreme Chancellor, you're concerned about whether human methods are compatible with galactic civilization's values. Precisely. The improvised weapons, the guerrilla tactics, the willingness to turn civilian infrastructure into military assets, these approaches suggest a fundamentally different relationship with warfare than most galactic species have developed. Sarah took a deep breath. This answer would determine not just her own future, but potentially humanity's role in the galactic community. Supreme Chancellor, human military philosophy is based on a single principle, the protection of civilization and the preservation of life. Our techniques may seem aggressive or ruthless, but they exist because we learned that the alternative to fighting smart is watching innocents die. She gestured toward the great windows that showed the peaceful expanse of space around Central Command Station. Every technique I've demonstrated, every improvised weapon or tactical innovation, exists because, at some point in human history, people were faced with threats they couldn't overcome through conventional means. They had to choose between developing new solutions or accepting defeat. Humans chose to keep solving problems. Representative Kreltax of the Krolex Mining Consortium spoke, his voice rumbling through subsonic frequencies. Lieutenant, are you saying that human techniques are inherently defensive? I'm saying that human techniques are inherently adaptive, Representative. We can use the same principles to build schools or destroy enemy positions, to create art or disable hostile technology, to preserve life or protect it from those who would take it away. The techniques themselves are neutral. It's the application that matters. Sarah paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces. The hostiles who attacked the Academy had studied galactic military doctrine for years. They knew exactly how to counter our standard approaches because those approaches are predictable. But humans aren't predictable because we don't have standard approaches. We have principles, and we apply them creatively to whatever situation we face. General Krexlon rose from his seat, his massive frame commanding attention throughout the chamber. Supreme Chancellor, I have served in the Defense Force for 63 years. I have seen numerous tactical innovations and technological advances, but I have never seen anything like what Lieutenant Chen and her cadets accomplished during the Academy crisis. He turned to face Sarah directly. Lieutenant, in your assessment, how would human integration change the nature of galactic defense? Sarah had spent months preparing for this question, working with Earth's best military strategists and Defense Force analysts to develop a comprehensive answer. General, human integration would create what we call adaptive resilience. Instead of relying solely on technological or biological advantages, Defense Force units would develop the ability to maintain effectiveness regardless of circumstances. Every soldier would be trained to see every environment as a source of tactical opportunities. She activated a holographic display that showed various tactical scenarios. A Defense Force unit equipped with human training wouldn't just fight differently, they would think differently. They would see solutions where others see only problems. They would turn disadvantages into advantages and find opportunities in impossible situations. The display showed side-by-side comparisons of conventional Defense Force tactics versus human-integrated approaches. The differences were striking. Most importantly, Sarah continued, human techniques scale infinitely. A single soldier can apply these principles. A squad can coordinate them. A fleet can implement them across multiple star systems. The same fundamental approach works at every level of military organization. Supreme Chancellor Vexthor's energy form shifted through several colors as he processed this information. Lieutenant Chen, if the High Council approves full human integration into Defense Force operations, what would you recommend as the initial implementation strategy? Sarah smiled. This was the moment she had been working towards since that first day when alien cadets had laughed at her bare hands. Supreme Chancellor, I recommend we start with the Advanced Training Academy on Proxima Station. Establish a human tactical integration program where selected cadets from all species spend 6 months learning to think like humans. Not just learning our techniques, but understanding our approach to problem solving. She paused, her confidence growing with each word. Additionally, I recommend establishing human technical advisory positions throughout the Defense Force command structure. Every major military operation should include human strategic input to identify unconventional solutions and adaptive opportunities. Representative Yalcerton of the Veltar hegemony raised her scaled hand. Lieutenant, what about cultural integration? How do we ensure that human techniques don't fundamentally alter the nature of galactic civilization? Representative Yalcerton, human techniques enhance rather than replace existing capabilities. A Zephyrian who learns human improvisation doesn't lose their natural flight abilities. They gain the ability to use those abilities in ways they never imagined. A Kralex who understands human adaptability doesn't become less strong. They become strong in situations where strength alone isn't sufficient. Sarah gestured toward her former squadmates in the audience. My Academy squad is the perfect example. Cathmore still has his Vorthin combat enhancements, but now he also knows 17 different ways to create weapons from debris. Zara Lynn still has her psychic abilities, but now she can maintain tactical coordination even when those abilities are jammed. Flux Singer can still manipulate frequency and vibration, but now they understand how to use physics and chemistry to achieve effects their natural abilities.